Welcome to Belgrade Online. We're glad you decided to join us today. I'm Jodi, and I'll be your host. Here at Belgrade, we hope to encourage you in your journey and explore what that means in new and beautiful ways. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode. Up next, announcements. Then we will see who's having birthdays and anniversaries this week. After that, we will hear from the pastor, the scriptures, and let the Spirit move you with some music before I come back to see you off. Welcome to Belgrade Online. This week's birthdays and anniversaries. On the 7th, happy birthday, Timothy Blum. On the 9th, happy birthday, Tom Jankowski. On the 10th, happy birthday, Larry Buller. On the 11th, happy birthday, Jillian Hedges. On the 11th, happy birthday, Dave Trask. On the 12th, happy birthday, Kelly Nance. On the 13th, happy birthday, Lori Dundas. On the 7th, happy anniversary, Brad and Jana Bauman. On the 10th, happy anniversary, Jim and Sylvia Clean. On the 11th, happy anniversary, Gary and Cheryl Zimmerli. On the 12th, happy anniversary, Tom and Marty Jankowski. On the 12th, happy anniversary, Kevin and Rachel We Smoke. Have a great week.
So I know Dan has been doing random summer thoughts. So I thought I'd also dive into a little random summer thoughts. I know earlier this summer when I filled in, I actually wrote something out and went full sermon on you, but this time I'll do some thoughts. So when I was 8, 10, I'll do a lot of playing ball with my dad, throwing the ball, hitting it in the yard. And I have to tell you, I was an expert baseball player. I was good. Then I started playing other people. And didn't quite pan out, didn't quite, wasn't quite performing like I did when I did performed against my dad. I was kind of surprised, but I was still confident that I was an amazing baseball player who, throughout his entire high school career, only hit one home run, and that was off the top of the fence and not even over the fence. So wasn't as good as I thought I was in retrospect, but that didn't shake me. And as I get older, like that story of, I told you about the extreme faith there. I thought I was a good youth group leader and an amazing, spiritual person. And then when push comes to shove and I hear an actual voice like we often talk about, but never quite hear, I chicken out. And, if you were to ask me now, I probably would say I could solve, all the world's problems if, give me control of Congress and get me in there, and I probably could make America right again, right? But the reality is, I'm probably overestimating my skill. And with that in thought, it reminded me of something. As some of you know, I'm doing a little doctoral work and getting towards the end of that. And I'm a therapist. So one of the documents I occasionally look at is this list of core competencies for therapists. And it's not a short list. There's several pages of different domains and skills that any therapist should probably know and should work on throughout their career. And when I was younger, I was confident that I was good in my skill, but now even though I have, 6-10 years in the field, something like that, I look at this and I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm good at this. Am I even a good therapist? I don't know if I have some of this down. I should have it down by now, right? So with kind of those two setups in mind, I watched a video a couple weeks ago and I wanted to share that.
Are you as good at things as you think you are? How good are you at managing money? What about reading people's emotions? How healthy are you compared to other people you know? Are you better than average at grammar? Knowing how competent we are and how our skills stack up against other people's is more than a self-esteem boost. It helps us figure out when we can forge ahead on our own decisions and instincts and when we need instead to seek out advice. But psychological research suggests that we're not very good at evaluating ourselves accurately. In fact, we frequently overestimate our own abilities. Researchers have a name for this phenomenon: the Dunning-Kruger effect. This effect explains why more than 100 studies have shown that people display illusory superiority. We judge ourselves as better than others to a degree that violates the laws of math. When software engineers at 2 companies were asked to rate their performance, 32% of the engineers at one company and 42% at the other put themselves in the top 5%. In another study, 88% of American drivers described themselves as having above-average driving skills. These aren't isolated findings. On average, people tend to rate themselves better than most in disciplines ranging from health, leadership skills, ethics, and beyond. What's particularly interesting is that those with the least ability are often the most likely to overrate their skills to the greatest extent. People measurably poor at logical reasoning, grammar, financial knowledge, math, emotional intelligence, running medical lab tests, and chess all tend to rate their expertise almost as favorably as actual experts do. So who's most vulnerable to this delusion? Sadly, all of us, because we all have pockets of incompetence we don't recognize. But why? When psychologists Dunning and Kruger first described the effect in 1999, they argued that people lacking knowledge and skill in particular areas suffer a double curse. First, they make mistakes and reach poor decisions. But second, those same knowledge gaps also prevent them from catching their errors. In other words, poor performers lack the very expertise needed to recognize how badly they're doing. For example, when the researchers studied participants in a college debate tournament, the bottom 25% of teams in preliminary rounds lost nearly 4 out of every 5 matches. But they thought they were winning almost 60%. Without a strong grasp of the rules of debate, the students simply couldn't recognize when or how often their arguments broke down. The Dunning-Kruger effect isn't a question of ego blinding us to our weaknesses. People usually do admit their deficits once they can spot them. In one study, students who had initially done badly on a logic quiz and then took a mini course on logic were quite willing to label their original performances as awful. That may be why people with a moderate amount of experience or expertise often have less confidence in their abilities. They know enough to know that there's a lot they don't know. Meanwhile, experts tend to be aware of just how knowledgeable they are, but they often make a different mistake. they assume that everyone else is knowledgeable too. The result is that people, whether they're inept or highly skilled, are often caught in a bubble of inaccurate self-perception. When they're unskilled, they can't see their own faults. When they're exceptionally competent, they don't perceive how unusual their abilities are. So if the Dunning-Kruger effect is invisible to those experiencing it, what can you do to find out how good you actually are at various things? First, ask for feedback from other people, and consider it, even if it's hard to hear. Second, and more important, keep learning. The more knowledgeable we become, the less likely we are to have invisible holes in our competence. Perhaps it all boils down to that old proverb: when arguing with a fool, first make sure the other person isn't doing the same thing.
I thought that was a fun video, or at least it kind of hit me right here. I tend to think of myself as very competent in a lot of areas, ranging back from when I was a kid and thought I was competent in baseball, but now that I've known more and, got a chance to play other people and realize, wait a second, I'm not as good as I thought I was. Or even with some of these, marriage and family skills, if you were to talk to me in grad school about how good of a counselor I was, I probably would have said I'm an excellent counselor. But now that I have a few years in the field, I'm kind of like, I'm not sure if I was as good as I thought I was. These people probably should go see a professional counselor, not me. No. So it got me thinking, and, even, then Dan asked me to do this sermon or this Sunday morning, and I got to thinking, too, of like, what does this mean for our spiritual lives? What does this mean for people we see in the Bible? We can read about, the New Testament and see a lot of stories about Pharisees, and they viewed themselves in the top 5% of probably the religious people of the time. And yet Jesus, God on earth goes to these people and is like, hey, you guys are like fools at this. You guys are missing the entire point. You're like way down there in the competency. So, if people in the Bible themselves are falling heir to this, being like, and I shouldn't even pick on the Pharisees. It goes way back to, even Old Testament times when there was high priests like Eli and his sons, and, they were like the actual leaders of the entire Jewish religion at that point, the top 5%. And, God says, hey, Samuel, go curse them because they're not doing their job. So, it wasn't like a New Testament phenomena. It was like throughout the entire, background of Israel since, Moses on up, God would go and say, you're not as competent as you think you are. So then fast forward to today, what does that mean about us? I've already told one story where, I was working with a church and, I was like, hey, I'm a pretty good Christian. And then this voice comes along, and then all of a sudden I get embarrassed, and I'm like, crap, I'm not as on par as I thought I was. So what does that mean about some of our competencies as Christians today? And, I don't want to, shame any of us, because I'm guilty of this too, but I want to read through a few different Christian competencies and, give you some time to think of, how developed are these skills? Are these things I practice? Are these things I do? So meditation, do we take time to meditate, to read, to think, daily devotionals, anything like that, reading scripture? Prayer, how often do we pray? Are we praying throughout every day? Do we is it only something we do here in church on Sundays, or is it something we do at home? Fasting, do any of us fast? I don't. You can probably tell. Study. How many of us take time to study, do a Bible study, do a, home study? Service. How many of us take time to do service? Obviously, the mission trip folks are going to go do service. Submission. How many of us take time to submit to things that it says in the Bible, or, other Christians, whatever the case might be. I certainly don't like to submit. I don't like other people telling me what to do. But it's a core Christian practice to submit oneself. Solitude. Sometimes people might take silent retreats. Some monks have devoted their entire lives to solitude. Simplicity. I don't like simplicity. I like extravagance every now and then. I like having the finer things in life. Confession. How many of us take time to confess our wrongs? I'm not great there. I don't like sharing my mistakes, assuming I can recognize my mistakes. Worship. How many of us take time to worship? Obviously, we're here, so you guys are pretty good at this one, but guidance, celebration. So that was one list of competencies. As Methodists, I'll read this other list. And this is somebody looking at the life of John Wesley. For those of you that might not know, John and Charles Wesley were the ones that started the Methodist movement. And Methodists were being called Methodist was the slang name people did to make fun of them. So we've kind of embraced that as our name by calling ourselves Methodist. But this author, looking at the life of John Wesley, said there's some different disciplines and competencies that he tried to develop, or John Wesley tried to develop. One of those being meditation. And this was a simple, a central piece to John Wesley's life. Prayer, fasting, giving to the poor, attending worship, simple living, discipline in reading. Says John Wesley was an ardent reader of the Bible, somewhat of a Bible worm or a bookworm. Committed to writing, so writing about the things in a journal on a daily basis. Trekking distance on the account of the gospel, that is like missionary work, going out, talking with people about it. And discipline in the area of drinking. So, abstaining from drinking and, things that were of worldly behaviors. And then it says the last one was committed to doing good. So trying to do good in the world. And this particular author says those were the disciplines John Wesley tried to, follow. So even some of those, how good are we at prayer? Do we have an Advent prayer life? Are we praying as often as we could? All those different kind of things. We might be tempted to, say, well, do all these Christians things really make sense? But there is some actual, research evidence that backs some of these things up. Mental health, we talk about meditation. So, even if you aren't a Christian, it talks about meditation being something that benefits people's mental health. I've talked with, people in the counseling sessions about meditation and reflecting on things. So even if you aren't a Christian, it's definitely something that's beneficial to life. Prayer, definitely something beneficial to life. Even if you aren't a Christian, there's scientific studies or different research studies that even talk about people healing faster in the hospital that are prayed for that aren't. So whether or not you believe there's anything to prayer, the research backs up that at least in some cases prayer helps. And the list goes on. So there again, not meaning to judge, just simply taking some of that, internal account, because it talked about taking a self-account, being self-aware, to see if we're as good at things as we think we are, seeing if we have mastered things as much as we think we have. For those of you that knew me when I first started attending here, at that point I was married, I would have probably said I was a great husband. Now, not seeing a ring, my ex would disagree wholeheartedly, but I didn't always take the time to listen to the feedback. So if I would have listened to the feedback then, maybe things would be different now, who knows. So, but that is the benefit of, I think, of community, of coming together as a church, and even the benefit of the Wesleyan movement, or the Wesley Brothers movement too, of this method, is coming together and taking a self-account. Because one of the fun things that I don't think we do as often here these days in Methodism as they did back in the day, but they would have small groups. They would ask themselves different questions, like how it is with your, how is it with your soul? How's your faith doing? How's your belief in God doing? So there's that time built into the worship for self-accountability, self-reflection, gathering feedback on, your spiritual practice and spiritual lives from other people, which is definitely one of the benefits of coming together as a community, of being able to get some of that feedback. And there again, I know in America we are very individualistic, and don't really like to submit to authority, don't really like to get feedback from others. As a general rule of thumb, there probably are people that do better at it than others, but the odd part about getting feedback from others is usually how accurate some of it is. For example, and maybe this is somewhat apples to oranges, but Never the Good is kind of a good anecdotal story about how feedback from a mass group can be accurate. So about 120 years ago, scientists found this phenomena about the accuracy of group feedback. And it started at a county fair. And if you asked, where there's a guess the weight of a cow competition, and if you asked any individual person, nobody got it right, and they were off by a lot usually. However, when they added all the results up of everybody that guessed, they were within a pound of what the cow actually weighed. And since hearing that, I've kind of because I'm more of an individualistic kind of guy, I like to go off there by myself and not really listen to feedback. But, that kind of humbled me too, of there is something about coming together as a community where maybe no one person is right or wrong, but there's something about coming together and getting that corporate feedback, that corporate togetherness that can really be accurate and beneficial. So anyway, that is my random summer thought for this summer of watching that video and just being like, how good am I at the things I think I'm good at? Am I actually spending time developing and gathering feedback on the things that are important in life? Professionally, these competencies, or even spiritually, some of the competencies. And what can I do to get better? And hopefully talking about that will have sparked something in you all, and maybe go out this week and think of something that you're actually good at, or maybe not as good at as you thought you were, or some spiritual discipline that maybe you need to brush up on or seek feedback on. So hopefully you take that throughout the week and think about one of those kind of things.
He's our rescuer. He's our rescuer. We are free from sin forevermore. Oh, how sweet the sound. Oh, how grace abounds. We will praise the Lord, our rescuer. There is good news for the captive. Good news for the shame. There is good news for the one who the good Lord is come to seek and save. He's our rescuer. He's our rescuer. We are free from sin forevermore. Oh, how sweet the sound. Oh, how grace abounds. We will praise the Lord, our rescuer. He is beauty for the blind man, riches for the poor. He is friendship for the one the world ignores. He is pasture for the weary, rest for those who strive. For the good Lord is the way, the truth, the life. Yes, the good Lord is the way, the truth, the life. He's our rescuer. He's our rescuer. We were free from sin forevermore. Oh, how sweet the sound. Oh, how grace abounds. We will praise the Lord, our rescuer. So come and be chainless. Come and be fearless. Come to the foot of Calvary. There is redemption from every affliction. Here at the foot of Calvary. So come and be chainless. Come and be fearless. Come to the foot of Calvary. There is redemption for every affliction. Here at the foot of Calvary. He's our rescuer. He's our rescuer. We are free from sin forevermore. Oh, how sweet the sound. Oh, how grace abounds. We will praise the Lord, our rescuer. We will praise the Lord, our rescuer.
Hey everyone, it's me, Jodi. I'm back to see you off. We hope you enjoyed your time with us today and that it was meaningful and life-giving. If you want to stay on top of things at Belgrade and know when we will be back, make sure to click the like button on Facebook or YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And be sure to hit the bell icon to get alerted when the next episode of Belgrade Online is available. Until next time, I'm Jodi. Thank you for watching and have a great week.